Thank you for pressing start on episode 10 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today we reveal and talk about 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Outer Wilds. I'm Bopo. Joining me today is my player 2, DiscoCola.
Hey, Bopo. How you doing?
I am doing just fine. My ancestor. So glad to be here on our last standard episode of season 1 of Underplayed. That's very exciting. We started doing this in private, and we're still kind of doing it in private, like 5 months ago.
Yeah.
We've every 2 weeks roughly, with sometimes a third week thrown in there, recording an episode, taking that time in between episode recordings to play the games, write down our thoughts about the games. We actually think about what we want to say, and we take the time to make sure we absorb the games fully. So now we're here at the end, episode 10. We're featuring Outer Wilds, which is a game that I've really focused on this past week, and I'm not going to reveal too much about my feelings on it yet, but I just want to say I think it's a very fitting last featured game for the season.
Yeah, I think when we planned it at the beginning, I was like, okay, whatever, fine. Bopo thinks it's a good closer. Sure, but you're having played it, I think you're absolutely correct.
Yeah. So very excited to get to that one today with you. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. If you listened to our last episode, you heard us say that this is our last normal episode of Season 1. Next episode, we're going to devote our time to reflecting on the 10 episodes that we have so far. We'll talk about our secret games, our featured games. We'll have about 31 games to talk about. We'll give out awards that aren't really worth anything to some of the games. We will rank the games. A lot of these rankings and awards are of little to no consequence to anybody, but it's a great excuse for us to kind of reach this milestone, look back, see what we've done so far, and then feel good about proceeding to season 2. So looking forward to that. We're also going to use part of the time next episode to plan which featured games we want to have for season 2. So we have kind of this master list of ideas. It's going to be a very messy conversation where we sort of vet out all these games and try to figure out not only which games, but a great strategic order to the games for what we want to feature at the end of all of our episodes for season 2. So that'll be a really interesting episode, especially if you like to kind of hear how the sausage is made.
Yeah. It'll be a little bit longer, but I think it will be really enjoyable to listen to. Hopefully, if you even like our podcast at all. And probably little editing on our part too, because it'll just be very candid conversation.
Yes, so. It will be mistake-ridden. It will be very unprofessional. So if you like hearing that kind of thing, if you like hearing us stumble around our words, then it'll be a great time for sure. Let's begin episode 10 with our secret games.
Secret games. Secret games. Secret games. Secret games.
So in this segment, we each pick a game since our last recording to play in secret. We don't tell each other what the secret games are. We come here prepared, having played our own secret games, and now we reveal them to each other. And we have no idea. I have no idea what you've picked. I want to say it's Swadum, but maybe it isn't. DiscoCola, let's get into it. What's your secret game for episode 10?
Well, originally, I wanted to play another time loop game that I recently discovered called Treasures of the Aegean, but given the price of the digital and the physical that just dropped, I'm a physical collector. I couldn't afford to double dip on this just to get it in for the episode, so I'm saving it for another time. Instead, for this episode, my secret game is Timespinner.
Okay, I have heard of this, but I haven't looked into it. I definitely recognize the name.
Timespinner is a Metroidvania-ish game from Lunar Ray Games. Arguments can be made against it being a Metroidvania, but it is most definitely an action exploration platformer. You search for hidden items, and it has sort of the grid system map that Metroidvanias are known for. And this game follows a young woman named Lunias. And again, There's a lot of names like this in the game, so apologies for any pronunciations that are incorrect. I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, I wouldn't do any better, I promise you.
Anyways, Lunias is born from a line of magic bearers called Time Messengers living on the planet of Windaria. Windaria is under the rule of the L'chaim Empire, which is how I'm pronouncing that. At the beginning of the game, right before your ceremony to officially become a Time Messenger, your planet is attacked by the L'chaimi army. The Time Messengers exist for this very purpose, though, to use the Timespinner in these sort of cataclysms to erase yourself from history, to change the past and save your clan. So during your escape, the Emperor kills your mother as you try to escape. She is also one of these Time Messengers. When you wake up, you are in L'chaim, and you set out to find pieces of the broken Timespinner. Eventually, you end up 1,000 years in the past in the very same L'chaim, and you gain the ability to travel back and forth between L'chaim 1,000 years ago and L'chaim, quote, present day. As with many Metroidvania-style games, you have an attack style that can vary based on different collectibles. In this case, you gain access to a variety of orbs that you use to melee attack your enemies. Some of them have elemental abilities. Some of them have, AoE effects. It varies based on which orbs you collect. You also gain a variety of mobility upgrades that open up areas that are previously inaccessible. Beyond that, you have a series of optional side quests, mostly given to you by jaded L'chaimi individuals, and a variety of boss fights, including a surprising number of optional boss fights. So I had an intention to push for this to be a featured review in an upcoming episode, but I was kind of in a tough spot, which is a shame because this game actually feels incredibly good to play. And there's totally a reason that it's so popular with speedrunners. Like, I think just about every year it's at one of the AGDQ events somewhere. So yeah, you get a lot of options for orbs to best play to your style, and you can have up to like 3 different loadouts to quickly switch between, which makes playing with different play styles for different situations that much easier. The movement mechanics feel great from the start and only get better. Boss battles are mostly intuitive, reasonably challenging, and uniquely designed amongst each other. And despite being the bold and confident character archetype I usually dislike, I actually like Lunias quite a bit, which is surprising to me. There's a decent amount of replay value in the level up system, variety of orbs, and multiple available endings. So I'm excited to boot up New Game Plus and try out newer orbs on the weaker enemies at the beginning of the game, and maybe check out some of the other endings. Music is a mixed bag. I think there's maybe like one song I dislike, but otherwise it's all good or better. There's one song in particular that kind of reminds me of like something that would have been on the Sega Saturn, which is kind of my favorite sound chip out there. So it's a mixed bag in that it's either good or awesome, but there's very little like in between there. A few things I don't like as much, and this may seem really petty. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't like anybody's name. There are all these kind of names that sound, that end with Eus or Lunaria or Harmiel or, very kind of medieval fantasy kind of names like that. It's a petty thing, but it makes it a little bit harder for me to keep track of all of the different relationships and how they relate to each other.
Do you feel like they're trying to go out of their way to make the character names like more elegant?
Some of the characters, yeah, I think that is the case, and this is something I'll probably bring up again later in this episode too. But related to that, there's just a little bit too much exposition. But fortunately, a lot of those really exposition-heavy elements are pretty optional. So if I could like split the difference between this game and maybe a game like The Mummy Demastered, which I think could have used a little bit more, I think it would be about perfect. While there are things that you can do in past L'chaim that affect present L'chaim, there aren't very many of those actions, and it sort of operates in a linear way that doesn't totally match what it means to time travel. So I think I would have liked a little bit more play with affecting the past and how it affects the future. And there's like a level cap that's insanely high For normal people, not a huge problem, but like I'm a compulsive completionist. And so I'm compelled to get like max levels on Lunias, each of her orbs, each of her familiar
dear.
pets,
All of the items.
all of the things.
Oh,
and
geez.
it's an insanely high level cap. So anyways, in the end, I give this game an 8 out of 10. I've had this game on my shelf for a while. I've both been looking forward to it and dreading it at the same time. But ultimately, it didn't disappoint. The movement is really well designed, and I'm really excited to turn it back on just to play around. Many story bits are really predictable. I kind of called the main twist pretty early on, so that official reveal was a little bit of a letdown. But in general, I had a really great time. And movement mechanics are top-notch. So looking forward to playing it again. I played the PS4 version from Limited Run Games. This is also available on Windows, Mac, Linux, PlayStation Vita, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox One.
Very accessible game.
Lots
Available
of ways to play
places.
it.
Yeah,
Yep.
very cool.
And I expect multiple ports probably in the future.
Cool. So it kind of looks like Castlevania meets Mega Man as I'm watching this trailer. You're kind of closed into this room with these bosses that kind of has the entrances that remind me of Mega Man, but then like a lot of the art style, a lot of the character design reminds me of Castlevania games I've played. I like the aesthetic of some of the orb stuff, like the orbs rotating around your character. It's 2D, but it's a really cool, almost like 3D effect that's going on here. And just like a really stunning looking world going on.
As even among like 16-bit style indie games, I say that the pixel art in this is among the best.
Yeah, and there's lots of effects where Lunias is moving around and like almost shifting through the air, and there's lots of kind of motion blur.
Yeah, and like after image stuff.
After image stuff.
I would go so far as to say that while a lot of 16-bit style games from the modern era add a lot of modern day effects, this one, there's not a lot of that in this game, and it looks like it actually could be on the SNES if the SNES was powerful enough.
Yeah, and I wish there were more of those opportunities for like the past actions to affect the present day.
Yeah.
I think that's something that kind of immediately springs to mind when you think of that kind of a concept, right, of like the time travel stuff. But very cool. If I had more time, I would love to like just take some time and play Timespinner. But that is DiscoCola's secret game, Timespinner. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
and,
I think I put in about 9 hours before I got the first credits roll and most of the item completion.
Okay, so you still have a little bit of grinding there to do to max everything out too. So you have some work ahead of you as well. All right, time for my secret game. My secret game on episode 10 of Underplayed is Watum. No, it's not Watum. It is Ape Out.
Oh, I have heard of this.
You've heard of Ape Out?
I have heard of Ape Out.
So Ape Out came out in 2019. It's developed by a trio. You might recognize one of these names, actually. Gabe Kazio, Matt Bach, and Bennett Foddy.
Oh, I do recognize one of those names.
So they don't really have a formal developer name to them, but this game is published by Devolver. I'm going to read the synopsis from the Steam storefront for Ape Out. So Ape Out is a wildly intense and colorfully stylized smash 'em up about primal escape, rhythmic violence, and frenetic jazz. So this game is an action arcade game through and through. It's top-down perspective. It's got very simple stylistic graphics, and you play as an ape trying to escape various facilities that are just filled to the brim with armed guards. And there's no explanation as to why there's so much armed security. There's not really a story here, but it's really just an excuse for you to smash dudes up. You can throw enemies, you can grab enemies, you can sneak around walls and corners, and then you can just run through if you want. So there's lots of ways to play this game. There are 4 different episodes that comprise the whole game. Each episode takes place in a different location. So there's a research facility, there's a skyscraper, a military compound that's kind of placed in the middle of a jungle, and then there's a giant ship. And then each episode has 8 levels that make up the episode. And at the start of each level, that's a checkpoint. So every time you clear a level, you're good. You know you don't have to redo your last section if you die. But each level takes just like maybe a minute or two all told. But you will need to repeat some of the levels because they do get quite challenging. So it's really just about doing these 1 to 2 minute gameplay sections, reaching a checkpoint, and then doing about 8 of those before you clear the episode that you're on. Enemies will shoot guns at you. If you get hit 3 times, you die, and then you have to start at your last checkpoint. What I like about this game is the style. The art style is inspired by the art of this guy named Saul Bass. And you've probably seen his work if you don't know his name. If you've seen famous movie posters for like Vertigo, or Anatomy of a Murder, or The Shining, or The Man with the Golden Arm. His style is about using lots of geometric shapes in kind of just really distinct ways. That's how I would describe the art going on here. And then while you're running through these levels, there's this free-form jazz that's playing in the background. And it dynamically changes according to how you're playing. It's so cool. The soundtrack is really energetic, and you'll hear these like crashing cymbals every time you grab a guy and throw him against a wall. He'll, splatter into this pool of blood, and you'll hear a cymbal crash to symbolize that. And sometimes you're running through a room with 5 or 6 dudes, and you're grabbing all of them, and every time you make an action, it's doing a cymbal crash. It feels like there's that really nice feedback when you make an action that's really violent. The violence is really striking, bright pools of blood. You're encouraged to rush in and go loud if you want, but you can also sneak through the levels and kind of go totally pacifist if you want to. That's a viable way to play. It is more challenging, but there's a couple different styles of gameplay you can attempt. A lot of listeners might have played the game Hotline Miami. That's a very popular indie title. This is very similar to that game, where it's like very frenetic, kinetic, fast action. And you're just trying to clear these levels as almost perfectly as you can. If you get hit too many times, then it's a complete start over of the section you're on. When you start to understand all the enemy types, it becomes really fun to rush through the levels. There's this great sense of rhythm. You start to kind of sight read the rooms. You start to see like, okay, here's a guy with, a bunch of armor on, and there's this guy with a machine gun. So I should grab him so I can mow down all the other guys. When you grab a guy with a gun, he'll automatically like shoot his gun when you grab him, but only for like a second. So you have to make sure you use it wisely. So you start to strategize about like what order you're going to grab the guards and where you're going to throw them, or whether you should just run through as fast as you can. The game is exhilarating, especially when you have 1 hit left. And I also love how the damage indication works in this game. In other games, you'd have like a health bar, 3 hits and you're dead. And there's segments to the health bar. In this game, when you get hit by a bullet, your first indication that you're damaged is that your ape will bleed a little bit onto the floor and he'll leave a trail of blood. And I think guards can even see that trail of blood and detect that you're around somewhere, maybe even follow you. I could be mistaken about that though, because I didn't get enough time to test it. But if you get hit a second time, your pool drip becomes larger. And that's how you know, I only have 1 hit left. So it's just a really great kind of organic way to show you that you're damaged. I like that. Very subtle, but effective. The final level in this game is genius. I won't spoil what it is, but I didn't see it coming and I thought it was really fun. So I have to give a shout out there. And I also have to say this game would have paired really well with Carrion. Because in Carrion, you're kind of playing this like very powerful monster that's just mowing down people. Like this same thing here. You just feel very powerful. The game can feel very one note because you're kind of just doing the same thing over and over. But I will say this game plays its one note super well.
Okay.
I did play this whole thing in one sitting. So you can complete this, not complete it, but finish it in one sitting. I did feel a little burned out by the time I got to the credits. The game does offer a hard mode and an arcade mode to you. I did try those out and, I tried them out for a few minutes apiece and I was kind of checked out. By that point, I was like, I don't have the energy for this. And I didn't go back to the game because I didn't feel like I was missing anything at that point. So had no desire to check out the extra modes, but Ape Out is a simple concept done in a very stylish way. I had no problems beating this in one sitting because of the fun factor. I recommend it to arcade action fans. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Cool.
So same score you gave to Timespinner.
Cool.
Yeah, super fun.
I noticed a couple other of I guess one big feedback thing that I've been noticing more and more lately as I play more and more games. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a little bit of a screen shake going on based on how your actions go. And that's, I think, an incredible way to create the joy whenever you do these actions. And it's done effectively here, especially with this striking looking distance.
Yes.
It's like you're shaking this entire, pillar around you. And I think that's really cool. And I wanted to point that out.
Yeah. That shaking, that's actually a setting that you can adjust on a slider.
Oh, wow.
I think there's 5 levels of shakiness, and you can even turn it off if you find it disorienting. But I think by default, it's at the maximum. I kept it on the whole time because I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
And when that coincides with the music, it's just super satisfying to me. Also, I didn't quite mention this yet, but the beginning of each level within each episode, each level has a title, and all the titles have really fun, quirky names, and they show up on screen in this very bold text. But the way each of them appears and animates in is different depending on what the name of the episode is. And the names of the levels are kind of a play on what the words are themselves. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I get what you're saying. Yeah. So if the name of the episode was A Clockwork Orange, maybe it would be a ticking clock, and the clock face would be an orange or something.
Yes, exactly. It would be a clockwork, and it would be ticking around the second hand, and then the word orange would show up in orange and the other words wouldn't.
Right.
It is so, it is that kind of style, very self-aware of what it's doing and trying just to experiment with style in many different ways, including just at a very basic level, how the levels are presented to you when they're titled on screen. So I thought that was really fun. So yeah, you can play it on PC, which is how I played it. I played it through Steam. You can also play it on Switch. And I think this is one of those really cool indie games that makes sense on Switch. I'm glad Switch got this as an indie game. Hope it comes to other places, but yeah, it's pretty accessible on 2 platforms that a lot of people have access to. So those are our secret games, Timespinner and Ape Out. We will now move on to our featured review of Outer Wilds. So Outer Wilds was released in 2019, and it was developed by Mobius Digital. This is also published by Annapurna Interactive. I'm going to read a very brief game synopsis from the Steam storefront. Then we'll set up the game, even more after that. So, from the Steam storefront, named Game of the Year 2019 by Giant Bomb, Polygon, Eurogamer, and The Guardian. Outer Wilds is a critically acclaimed and award-winning open-world mystery about a solar system trapped in an endless time loop. A little boastful there with all the Game of the Year awards. So 4 Game of the Year awards by prominent gaming journalism outlets there. But DiscoCola, this game is very hard to talk to someone about in an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
I think. So what I'd like to do is set up this game kind of like we've been doing the last few episodes, give context to what's going on in the game before we share our overall thoughts. But for listeners, just so you know, we might have to do a little bit more setup than usual to tell you what's going on here. And I just also want to give a light warning that I think this game is very fragile when it comes to spoilery stuff. And I would encourage you, if you want to experience this game and you're interested in it, I would go in as fresh and unspoiled as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think you're safe listening to kind of our expanded setup of what's going on in this game. But once we start sharing our overall thoughts,
it's going to be hard.
It's going to be hard to listen without spoiling some of the special moments of this game. So I would encourage you in a few moments, maybe consider pressing pause on this episode and play the game. I'd say it takes, I don't know, it depends on how good your intuition and your exploration skills are, but it might take you anywhere between like 15 and 30 hours.
Yeah, maybe even like closer to 12 if you're
If you're really
especially
good.
good, or if you don't care as much about exploration, you just find the solution, you know?
Yeah. And then with that, Disco, as I'm going through this intro, help me out if I miss something that you feel is important. In this game, you play as a member of an alien species, and this species is very much into space exploration.
Mhm.
And they have a space exploration program called Outer Wilds Ventures. And this game is played in the first-person perspective. When you start the game, you wake up next to a campfire on your home planet. You have a village. And this is the first day where you're embarking on a solo expedition in your ship, right, to go explore space. And the game is all about exploring your solar system. And so the first thing you have to do is go get some launch codes so that you can take off. So you have to go up to your observatory in your village. You talk to one of your friends. He gives you the launch codes. And you make your way back down to your ship. Except first, you have a strange interaction with an artifact from an ancient civilization that once colonized in the solar system. The race is called the Nomai. So they have an artifact that your race has in the observatory, have a strange interaction, and then you go to your ship. And you're free to then explore your solar system. You can go to a handful of planets. And it's not long after that that you discover that today that you're playing is also the day that your sun in your solar system has reached its expiration date, and it goes supernova and destroys every planet in your solar system and kills you. And then you think you're dead, but then you kind of see a vision of all the moments that have led you to your death. And then you wake up and you're back where you started at the campsite in your village on the same day. And you have now entered a time loop. And every 22 minutes, the sun will go supernova again and kill you again. And you will wake up again at the campsite. If you die prematurely by an accident, maybe you fall in a fire or a pit or something, or run out of oxygen somewhere in space, you will again wake up in the same spot, be in the same time loop. So there's no way to seemingly escape. And this game is all about re-entering this time loop of 22 minutes over and over and over, and exploring all of the planets in your solar system and finding out why time is looping, what happened to some of your colleagues in your space program who have already explored all the other planets and are camping out there, and then what happened to that ancient civilization I mentioned, the Nomai. They were also obsessed with space and exploration. So they have a whole set of mysteries and secrets to uncover. So that's the setup that I would give to somebody. It would take much longer than an elevator ride, right? Anything you would add to that?
No, my elevator pitch has actually been pretty short. So I think you've covered most of it. I would say that it's important to note that in this specific time loop, not everyone is aware that they are in a time loop. And I think that that's important.
So you're special
Yes.
in that way. You're special in a couple ways, in that it's your first day of solo expedition and that you're the only one trapped in this time loop. So I think before we ask you about your overall thoughts, I think this is where I would just gently suggest to people who haven't played the game to go play the game at this point. I think that's where you can probably drop off. Otherwise, keep listening, and let's just get right into your overall thoughts, DiscoCola.
Real quick, I want to reiterate, I'm the kind of person that doesn't enjoy open world exploration, and this is open worlds exploration, and I'm still encouraging you to maybe give it a shot because I ultimately enjoyed the game. That wasn't the case throughout every point of my journey, I would say. Have you ever, Bopo, played a game where maybe you had a mixed bag of an experience, but then the ending made it up?
Yes, with this game.
Okay.
Not to spoil too much up front, but I'm
Yeah.
sure there have been other experiences too, but I totally know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like I said, I don't love open world exploration, especially like 3D open world exploration. And this throws 6 worlds at you or more. I don't know, 6 or something.
Yeah, there's 5 or 6 planets, and then there are a handful of other locations you can go
Yeah.
to. There's some moons, there's a comet, so it's hard to quantify it, but yeah, we're talking about a handful of planets, right? Yeah.
And so it's totally not my kind of game, but I can tell that the game was made with a lot of passion. That's very clear while you're playing it. I also watched the documentary from NoClip, and seeing the actual devs like talk about it reinforces that idea even more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very obvious when you play this game that it's made with a ton of passion, very creative. My least favorite planet is one of the most creative environments I've ever played in a video game, the Brittle Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
Hate being there. Super cool planet. But, there's a lot of times where I would play this game and I would get very frustrated. I remember probably the 4th time I streamed it, I was just in such a bad mood the whole time because I would spend entire loops and only ultimately like add 1 entry to my ship log. And it would feel like such a waste of time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get so frustrated because I'm trying to find the solution and I know the location of the solution, but I just can't get into where I actually record it into my ship.
Yes.
And so I can't confirm those kinds of things. So
Yeah, so just to reinforce this concept, I talked about how you're supposed to just kind of uncover these mysteries, figure out what's going on, why time's looping, what happened with this Nomai ancient civilization. The way you progress in this game is by building your actual knowledge about the game world. There's no progression as far as advancing your character power. You don't get skills. You don't get stronger and better and faster physically. It's all about building your knowledge and finding clues that clue you into where to go next in the world.
mhm.
And
And I think that's also its greatest strength too, because if you put, 10 billion people in a room and they're all playing Outer Wilds, one of those people is going to get to the end of the game on their first loop. Everything in Outer Wilds is available at the beginning to you. It's just a matter of where you decide to go or where you happen to go.
Yeah.
And that's what you learn about. And I think that that's really cool. And it's not something I've experienced before in a lot of the adventure platformers and Metroidvanias that I usually play. You have to go out and get more powerful before you can explore the world that's available to you. In this game, everything's available to you right
Yeah.
from the start.
I don't mean to interrupt too much, but I've talked about this game with some friends and coworkers since playing it. And the way I've described it to them is that even if you've never played this game before, if you sat down to play it your first time, I could sit down next to you and tell you exactly what to do. And you could do it from that moment, but that's not the point.
Mhm.
And that's very interesting because not many games, surprisingly, let you do that.
Yeah. Another one of the things that could be a point of frustration, but also joy, is flying your ship. It's one of the things that you do the most in this game. It's very challenging to get the hang of. Even still, I don't think I've mastered it, but it's also still so fun. And I think it's a lot of what makes the game really fun. I kind of, in my notes, liken it to playing GTA when you're a middle schooler. You can just get in a tank and ignore the objectives and just maybe fly into Giant's Deep and see if you can break through the barrier for fun,
Right.
or you can see, if I go this fast and crash into Dark Bramble, will my ship explode or will I be fine? You can do things like that, I think, and that's pretty fun just on its own. But I think one of the most enthralling things at the end of my journey is music in this game. And I think music really won me over in the end because there were those times that I started to get really frustrated, really took a toll on how I felt about the game. But like I said, the ending made it all worth it. And a lot of that has to do with music. Retroactively getting to the ending made me appreciate the music that maybe I wasn't appreciating in the moment a little bit more.
Yeah.
And at times find myself just tearing up listening to the soundtrack. So yeah, I think ultimately it's something that indie game fans should experience. We've said it a lot on the show, but there really isn't a game that I've played quite like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't super stoked to start it, knowing what I knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that I experienced it.
I'll go into my thoughts. I think this is perhaps the single best example I can think of a game that is often befuddling and cryptic and very unkind and very unhelpful toward the player. It's an example of a game that is confounding and makes the player often feel lost, but it's also a great example of a game that I nonetheless very much admire and that I am in awe of and that I respect to an incredible degree. This game has captured my attention and my imagination this past week in a way that few other games I feel have. I think in a way more than any other game we've played for this season 1. It's almost all I think about when I'm not doing something else. Outer Wilds makes me feel so many emotions, and often so many emotions all at once. So many complex feelings can coalesce when you play this game. There's just the innate sense of wonder that comes with science fiction, space exploration, the mystery of that, the feeling that you can go anywhere in this solar system. But then when you get a grasp of what you can do in this game and that you're just sort of free to go anywhere, then you kind of get this sense of feeling overwhelmed, that there's so much to see and do, and followed by this feeling that you're really small in this large space. And then this would often lead to this sense of fear, especially regarding the unknown. I'd become overwhelmed with fear so much playing this game. I think this game is scarier and more frightening than many horror games I've played, just because of how powerless it can make you feel, how lost it can make you feel. But at the heart of it, there's always this sense of like wanting to uncover the mysteries and make new discoveries. And when you do make those new discoveries, when you start piecing together the secrets, you get these shifts in your understanding of how this solar system works. And then that becomes really energizing. Oh, wait, I can learn more about this place. Like, it isn't that frightening. I can maybe uncover something that nobody else before me uncovered. And because of all of those emotions swirling around, I would often feel goosebumps and shivers down my spine, and sometimes even choking up. And that was just like so powerful for me. I don't think I've played many games that made me feel all those things at once. There are so many revelations to make in this game. There's a meme that I'm sure you're familiar with, but it's the Galaxy Brain meme.
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about?
Of course.
It's like 4 panels where it's like a very simple mind and then a slightly more advanced mind and an advanced mind and then like this, galaxy expanding mind. And it's every single box next to it is like, I'm going to give a bad example, but it's like, peanuts and then peanut butter and then peanut butter and jelly and then Reese's peanut butter cups. I don't know. That's a bad example.
That's a pretty good example.
This game makes you feel like that meme, basically, with all its revelations. There are discoveries like you find out that things repeat the exact same way every time loop. So it's like, oh, wait, if I know that time repeats the same way, then I can make an observation about what's going on here, and I can know that will always happen. That's kind of cool. The only variable in this whole space is you and what you do. Then you have to learn like all the quirks that make all the planets different. So there's the hourglass twins, the way those planets work. There's Brittle Hollow, which you mentioned, being kind of a stressful place to be. Giants Deep, another place you mentioned. Giants Deep was
stressful in its own way.
The first time I broke through the atmosphere and entered Giants Deep, that was one of those moments where I just shuddered in fear. It's a planet covered entirely with water, and there's giant cyclones, giant tornadoes all over the place. And masses of land are being lifted up into the atmosphere and then crashing back down. It's like, you're just this tiny ant in the middle of it all. It's like, what do I even do? Like you said, the music is so beautiful. It's simple, and it sometimes invokes this sense of dread. Every time you approach the end of a loop, you get this piece of music that comes in out of nowhere. It hits you. It's just like this. And when you hear that music, you know, oh no, I only have like 90 seconds to do what I need to do.
Yep.
And it causes this sense of urgency. You need to finish what you started.
I have another thought about that later too. Don't let me forget.
And then there's a lot of simplicity in the campfire nature of the songs too, but those kind of have dual meaning. They can mean different things depending on where you are in this game. Like at first they're kind of these like quirky, happy, fun songs. And then they kind of have this sense of like reminiscence to them at times. And then a sense of sadness at other times. There's a great sense of freedom in this game. You can go anywhere and discover everything in any order that you want. No two people will play this game in the same order in the same way. I love the clues and the breadcrumbs and how they lead into each other. There's these 4 big mysteries in the game that are laid out in your ship's log, and they have huge question marks next to them, but all of them are tied to dozens of smaller secrets, all these breadcrumbs, and sometimes a secret will just lead to another secret or another clue that leads to another clue that then feeds into a giant topic to uncover. So I liked how all of those were kind of like tied together, and how I might discover something on Giant's Deep that relates to Brittle Hollow. And then the thing that I get led to there, oh, I learned something about the Hourglass twins. Oh, that's interesting. You know, it recontextualizes things that sometimes you learned hours ago. I also just want to point out that I think the visuals are very thoughtfully designed to teach players what to focus on. When you hone in on what this game is doing to guide your attention, it is masterful. More important places have more detail. So like this game, with all its planets, all its places to go, it might seem overwhelming that there are secrets to uncover. Like, where would I even go? But then you start to realize, oh, the environments are actually very simple when you're not meant to look that closely at them. It's only when the detail gets greater that you're supposed to hone in on things. And that's how you're clued in on where to go. And you learn that very early. And then that becomes the language of the game, of like what it's trying to tell you to focus on. And I want to point out, a few episodes ago, I thought this was an interesting like contrast. You described Hyperlight Drifter in episode 8 as accomplishing a complex design on a very small canvas. Mm-hmm. Do you remember saying that? Mm-hmm. Outer Wilds is the inverse.
Yeah.
Outer Wilds is a great example of having a very simple design spread across a massive canvas. And depending on what kind of game you're making, both strategies can work. So I thought that was very interesting to think about. I also struggled with the game in a number of ways. So it took me a while to learn the ship controls. I never totally mastered the controls. I feel like I still don't have them down completely, but the ship is very fun when you're just kind of in space going as fast as you can. The game, I feel, needs more ways to save my time and patience as a reward for making discoveries, right? So you start to learn how a lot of these planets work, and there are these events you discover that require you to pass time. And you can pass time by resting at a campfire if you want to skip large amounts of minutes at a time so that you're not just standing there waiting for something specific to happen. But I wish there were more things like let my character learn a password to a door that leads to a shortcut so that I don't have to do like a 5-minute excursion through this like cavern to get to this place because the door that should lead there is sealed off. You know what I mean? So,
gee, what place are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm referring to one specific place in that instance, but not the only instance, in my opinion. I also got super confused on which breadcrumbs to follow at a certain point. There got to be a time about like 8 hours into this game where I'm filling out my ship log. I have all these question marks, and I just don't know which one is the most important one to go explore. And that's where I got overwhelmed with this feeling of choice. It's like, I need a little more direction on what to do. I felt like I had a lot of knowledge, but I didn't know how to put it together. Mm-hmm. And that was frustrating because it's like, I've done all this work. I have all these bricks, and I don't know what the building looks like. I don't know how to build the building. Game, help me out. So there actually were like two notable things I had to look up in order to finish this game on time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. I played as long as I could without having to do that. And I unfortunately did need to do that. Some of the things were, I don't know that I would have discovered them for, many more hours. So I'm glad I ended up doing that to get the game done in time for our recording. So I just felt like there was a lack of a clear goal at times. That's frustrating, even if that is the point of the game, unfortunately. So this game is unlike any other adventure game I've played. It can be an exercise in patience, especially before you piece things together for the first time. But it's one of the most harrowing and terrifying games I've played. It encourages and rewards taking risks and experimentation. It celebrates science fiction and the wonders of space. It evokes so many emotions, often all at once. It's not my favorite game from our season, but I think it's going to be the one that I talk about the most to people outside of this room. So I'm going to give this game a 9 out of 10.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I did not say my score, but I would not score it quite as high, but 8.5 for me.
8.5. Okay.
Yeah, I think a couple other things that I remembered while you were talking. The solar system is very organic. When you're not there, things still happen, and that can play a role in so many ways. Or it can just remind you of how, like you said, how insignificant maybe you are.
Right.
And one of the other things you talked about, how you have all these bricks. And you had to look some things up. I was in the same boat. I had to look some things up, stuff I definitely would have never figured out, even if I kept playing, I think.
That's frustrating.
I'm thinking specifically of one puzzle on Giants Deep. I never would have found that. And that's the one solution that I needed, because about 8 hours in, I found the point that is the end of the game, but I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't do it because I didn't know the solution.
And, talking very vaguely here for the listener's sake, are you talking about the big on Giants Deep? The big?
Yeah.
You're talking about that? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know that either. That's something I had to look up.
Yeah. And there's a few things that I had to look up. I didn't look up, the specific puzzle solution for the end, but I looked up where I needed to go to find that solution. And so that got really frustrating because I was 8 hours in. I'm like, oh, this is the end of the game.
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything.
The game assumes you will be thorough in exploring a couple places and trying every option, even if the game doesn't give you a clue to do that. So that's just something you have to know going in, is that you should know that you have to be thorough in a couple places. Yeah. Did you want to make another comment about music? I was talking about
Yeah. So the end of the loop theme.
End of the loop theme.
That comes back again. There's one item that you have to pick up in order to activate the end game. Once you pick up that item...
I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Once you pick up that item, a variation on that theme plays. And that is because once you pick up that item, your loop is over.
Yeah. And
so it's very much
it's very hard to know when you're about to reach the end.
Yeah.
Or when the sun is going to supernova again. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So this theme is like more than just end of loop, but like end of the line. This is a point of no return.
Sure.
Kind of.
Totally get that. I also felt that. I wanted to ask about memorable moments. A moment that might stick with you from this game, if you have any of those. I have an example.
Very much have one of those, and it's the ending of the game.
Ending of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. The ending you can't see coming. It is, wow.
Like I have a general idea of the whole time of what it was, but the way it played out totally floored me. Again, use of music, very strong in driving the emotion or just the point of the ending.
Yeah.
It floored me, and I didn't expect it to. And I've played games like Last Day of June, that had me weeping by the end, but it was so different. It was so incredible. I think about it all the time. And I've watched it just several times since I finished the game.
I'm right there with you. This whole time, this like last 5 to 10 minutes, I've just had constant goosebumps thinking about this game and like shivers down my spine too. A moment from the game I'll think about for a long time. On Brittle Hollow, there's a structure called the Tower of Quantum Knowledge.
Which I haven't explored yet.
You have not?
I have not.
Oh my
I know
goodness.
I know about it.
Okay, well, I won't spoil anything for the listeners, but so Brittle Hollow is this planet that's constantly crumbling. It has meteors hitting it, or magma or something is hitting it.
It has a volcanic moon that is throwing meteors
yes.
at it. Yes.
And so every time it gets hit, it's constantly crumbling, and pieces of the crust are falling down into a black hole in the center of the planet. Very unique design for a planet. When you get to this planet, you might find this tower called the Tower of Quantum Knowledge, and you see just the top of it on the surface. And there's a staircase leading down below the crust. And when you walk down that staircase, you get to the bottom of the tower. So now you're under the crust by a good amount. You can enter the tower at the bottom and look up, and the tower is very tall. And you know that there is stuff up at the top that you need to see, because that will lead you to a clue to one of the big mysteries of the game. And I remember getting there in the first 3 hours that I played and looking up, and there is a wall that allows you to walk on it and defy gravity for a moment while you're on this wall and walk up the tower. So you should be able to walk up there, but a section of that walkway has broken off. So you are cut off from walking up to the top of the tower. So you look up there and you think, I can't get up there. I can't use my jetpack because there's not enough power. I can't jump. It's way too high. Can't fly my ship up there because I can't get my ship down here. So I guess I have to just find something else later. And then 12 hours later, I determined that I really need to find out what's up there. And I go back to Brittle Hollow, and I'm in the same spot I was at. I'm looking up there, and then something happens that I just was not at the right time for before. And I realize, that's how I get up there. And I get up there, and the event that causes you to be able to go up there happens 17 or 18 minutes into a loop, right? The loops are 22 minutes long. I'm approximating with how long it takes, but you only have a handful of minutes to then get to that information you need up there. And I had lost track of time. So I'm thinking I made my way up here. I had forgotten that the sun's about to supernova, right? And then the music starts hitting. The end of the loop music starts. And I haven't read everything in the Tower of Quantum Knowledge. And then I have this sense of urgency. I'm like, this tragic thing's about to happen. I need to figure out all this stuff. I need to absorb this information. And all this stuff that I'm reading is revelatory. It's oh my gosh, I'm learning something here. And I am speed reading everything. And there are paragraphs to read. And I'm like, no, what? Even though I know all this information, I could just automatically scan it and it will go into my ship log and I can read about it later. I want to read it word for word.
Mm-hmm.
I also know full well that I could just, if I don't get everything, I know how to get there now. I could do it on the next loop. But because of the way this game is set up, it sets up these scenarios where you want to maximize your loops. And so it was this very energetic moment where I just wanted to absorb everything. And I'm almost crying because it's so stressful. I'm like, wait, okay, so this, and I'm reading everything out loud to myself. And oh my gosh, what a time that was. I had lots of moments that were similar to that, but that's one that stood out for me. We messaged very vaguely about the game in the few weeks leading up to this recording. And you kind of checked in with me and you asked how are you doing on the game? Or you feel like you're going to finish it in time for our recording date? I said, yeah, I think I should have some quality time to get with the game this weekend. And, I have so many hours in it so far. The game makes me feel stupid often. So do you relate to that?
I do. Yeah. And I mentioned it, but I think of the observatory on Brittle Hollow.
Yeah.
I think.
It's the Southern Observatory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the solutions that I needed, I knew was in there, but I couldn't figure out for the life of me how to get in there. And I spent so much time.
I spent a ton of time
jetpacking in places that I didn't need to be jetpacking in, falling into the black hole and wasting the rest of my loop.
Yes. I also struggled with getting there.
Yeah.
And the place you need to go doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
As far as which, there's a trailhead that you need to take that takes you there. And where that trailhead is, where it starts, is I never would have guessed that.
It's nonsense. And there's like ice melt, place or something. And so there's just a lot of places that I literally would have never found without dozens of more hours or a guide. And that makes me feel stupid. And then getting on loops where I only add, one thing to my log, even though I was looking for stuff the whole time, that makes me feel kind of dumb.
Sometimes you're on the verge of a discovery and you just don't have that extra minute that you need. And then you honestly don't make any new discoveries. That can be a little frustrating too. So, I relate with that. I relate to that a lot. It's amazing to me that a game that can be so frustrating and unhelpful toward the player can still be a game that I am just in awe of. Like I'm going to be thinking about this game for a long time. And if it just fixed a few of those issues and made some of the larger moments just a little less hidden, a little bit more accessible, I think it would just transcend even higher for me.
Yeah.
So.
I think that helps to make it seem more organic in ways, but it's just so obtuse is the word that you like to use.
Yes. There's obtuse in several ways, but any other thoughts about Outer Wilds? We've been going for a good amount of time here. I feel like I've expressed my feelings on the game as much as I want to.
I think I have as well. Thank you, Andrew Prallo. I'm going to be following your musical career from now on for sure.
Absolutely. But, okay. Well, that's a great place to wrap up here. That's our review of Outer Wilds. You can play it on Nintendo Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Disco rated it an 8.5. I rated it a 9. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Oni Mochi. My name's Bopo, and you can find me on Twitter at Bopo. That's BO_PO.
And I am on Twitter and Twitch as DiscoCola.
Next time, we will recap and reflect on all the games we've covered in Season 1. Immediately following, we will decide on our lineup of featured games for Season 2. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.